We lost all our officers. In Ihantala, as well as in other parts of the frontier, an effort was always made to deliver the bodies of the combat casualties into their home communities for blessing and burial. The frontier chaplains organized this effort. They shared their strength and belief in the midst of heavy battles and gave comfort to those in need. The driver said that among the wounded there seemed to be one dead. So if he could leave the dead there, and we said of course. The stretcher was lowered down and well, then this guy's finger started moving. Both the doctor and I practically screamed that this one is alive. So the guy was taken to the dispensary room and we began treating him. Well, I don't know about his later fate, but he left us alive. The life of a human can depend on so little.
The most intense enemy offensives took place on the church hill of Ihantala and Pyöräkangas area, less than 2 kilometers west of the church. The enemy artillery hammered the church hill and the graveyard nearby, where the Finnish positions were located. Tanks supported the attacking infantry. The 12th Regiment of Colonel Hunsteb, at the strength of less than 3,000 men, was to take the hardest hits. Also Colonel Laaksonin's Jaeger Regiment 35 and Separate Battalion 16 fought in Ihantala during the decisive phase of battle.
I was with General Vihma twice in Pyöräkangas, after the Russians had been thrown back with a counterattack. It was a horrible sight. Thousands of shells had been fired there and dead Russians were in dense piles at our feet. There were hundreds of bodies.
Sanoin kavereille siinä, kun
well, the boys were kind of looking around for drinking water and I also went looking for a place with water. Well, I managed to find this grenade hole filled with water. There was something else as well. However, I took some of it into my container and said to the boys that you need to boil this water before drinking it. We made a fire and boiled the water. We were there a couple of hours, boiled the water and drank it. But I would no longer drink that water. There was a Russian hero in the same hole. We were that thirsty.
The Russians tried again in the afternoon to attack from the direction of Kokkomäki, supported by an intense fire preparation. The attack was supported by over 20 tanks, but the Finnish artillery and mortars disbanded the attacking troops, and the ones left died in the infantry weapon fire in front of the lines.
Se oli ihmeellistä, kuinka se lyhyessäkin ajassa
It was really strange how the whole scenery changed. I mean, in such a short time.
Kuinka nämä puut,
trees, they took the splinters fairly well. But when there's so many splinters, and then of course there's also the aerial bombing. The forest was thinned out absolutely enormously. We were beside the cemetery of Ihantala, and then for some reason we went back a couple of kilometers back. I don't know why, but when we did come back, we could no longer recognize this cemetery as the place where we'd already once been.
The Finns used 9,000 grenades in a concentrated manner during the day. 27 enemy tanks lay destroyed or paralyzed in front of the lines. Most of them had been stopped by Panzerfausts and Panzerschrecks.
Oma kolonna joutui hakemaan
Our convoy had to fetch the artillery shells from Pulsa. That's some 30 kilometers away. And the men drove ammunition for the first week, practically without sleeping. Then again, there was more than plenty of ammunition.
Kyllä niitä riitti.
When time permitted, important separate targets were fired at with single artillery guns. One of them was the Ihantala bridge in front of the front line. It was extremely important to the enemy. It had been charged with explosives, but time had not allowed blowing it up. The engineers originally responsible for this had died. It was decided that the bridge be destroyed. Captain Karhola was responsible for the firing, supported by his observers. Hit by a heavy caliber grenade, the bridge was blown into the air with its explosives and nearby tanks. With the bridge destroyed, no tank could cross the brook. The tanks stuck on the north side of the bridge were demolished one after another.
Mutta siinä oli menossa siis rankka
There was a fierce tank-supported attack going on, so that this firing to hit was just a secondary event. And when the bridge finally blew up, there were 7 undamaged tanks were left on our side. And strangely enough, 3 heavy tanks had turned over near the bridge and were destroyed. Some of the tanks were on the south side of the brook, in Kokkomäki.
Eteläpuolella.
On July 2nd, counterattacks were necessary only in Tähtälä. Elsewhere, 5,000 grenades was all that was needed. Despite their heavy casualties, the Russians still strove for a breakthrough in Ihantala. They had concentrated their reserves in the area. The Finnish signal intelligence was up to its task. On July 2nd, it had intercepted an important radio transmission which revealed that the Russians would start the attack the next morning. Aerial photography confirmed the accuracy of this information. The artillery fired and the Air Force bombed these enemy attack formations.
We had plenty of time to fire our closures into the foreground, and the Russian infantry was very sensitive to our artillery fire. Our fire observers said that when the Russians heard our artillery being fired, their attack movement was stopped.
Kun annoin sen tulikommennon, niin
When I gave the command to fire, I didn't give any amounts, but told them just to keep them coming as much as they could deliver, fully aware that such a command was not in the field manual. But this is how I did it.
The Russians started their attack already having suffered casualties, but the Finns repelled the attacks. Only on Pyöräkangas did the enemy capture some ground.
3. päivä heinäkuuta.
On the 3rd of July, the Russians got a breakthrough of about 1 square kilometer in Pyöräkangas, just west of Ihantala Church Hill. General Vihma threw in to counterattack 3 battalions, one from the west, one from the north, and one from the northeast. After a fire preparation of 15 artillery battalions, that's nearly 200 guns. And by the early hours of the 4th of July, the Russians were thrown back from Pyöräkangas.
A Finnish counter-offensive concentrated from 3 directions, supported by artillery and mortars, succeeded. The concentrated use of Finnish artillery and mortars had reached its maximum effectiveness. On July 3rd, Finnish consumption of artillery ammunition was at its highest, nearly 12,000 grenades.
Lata!